Let's begin our journey into the world of trees, those ancient, silent companions that have stood beside humanity since the very beginning. Close your eyes and imagine yourself walking through a quiet forest at dusk, where the air is cool and filled with the gentle whisper of leaves. Trees are some of the oldest living things on our planet. In fact, the oldest known tree still alive today is a bristlecone pine in California named Methuselah, which has been growing for over 4,800 years. Think about that for a moment. This tree was already ancient when the pyramids of Egypt were being built. It has witnessed nearly 5,000 years of sunrises and sunsets, of seasons changing, of the world transforming around it while it stands, patient and enduring. But trees are even older than that as a presence on Earth. The first trees appeared on our planet around 385 million years ago, during a time called the Devonian period. Back then, the world was a very different place. There were no flowers, no grass, and certainly no humans. These early trees, called Archaeopteris, were among the first plants to develop what we now recognize as wood and proper roots. They changed everything. Before trees, the land was covered mostly in small plants and ferns. But trees reached upward, creating the first forests, the first canopies, the first shadows on the earth. As you settle into your pillow tonight, consider how trees breathe for us. Every tree is quietly, continuously performing a miracle called photosynthesis. During daylight hours, trees take in carbon dioxide, that gas we exhale with every breath, and through the magic of sunlight and their green leaves, they transform it into oxygen and glucose. A single large tree can produce enough oxygen in 1 year to support 2 people for their entire lives. So in a very real way, every breath you're taking right now, as you relax, some of that oxygen was gifted to you by a tree. The leaves themselves are remarkable structures. Each leaf is covered in tiny pores called stomata, thousands upon thousands of microscopic openings, mostly on the underside of the leaf. These stomata open and close like little mouths, allowing the tree to breathe in carbon dioxide and release oxygen and water vapor. On a hot summer day, a large oak tree can release up to 40,000 gallons of water into the atmosphere through these stomata in a process called transpiration. This water becomes part of the clouds, part of the rain, part of the endless cycle of water that sustains all life. Now, let's travel underground for a moment, beneath the forest floor where you cannot see. The roots of trees spread wide and deep, sometimes extending twice as far underground as the tree's branches spread above. But here's where it gets truly magical. Beneath the soil, trees are connected to one another through an intricate network of fungal threads called mycelium. This underground web, sometimes called the wood wide web, allows trees to communicate with each other, to share nutrients, to send warnings about insect attacks, and even to support their young. A mother tree can recognize her own seedlings through this network and send them extra nutrients to help them grow strong. Trees don't just stand alone and silent. They are part of a vast community, both above and below ground. A single tree can be home to thousands of species of insects, birds, mammals, fungi, and other plants. One oak tree, standing tall in a temperate forest, might support over 2,300 different species of organisms throughout its lifetime. It becomes an entire ecosystem unto itself, a tower of life rising from the earth. As you begin to drift toward sleep, think about the heartwood of a tree. At the center of every tree trunk is the heartwood, the oldest part of the tree, no longer living but still essential. This dense, dark wood gives the tree its strength, its ability to stand tall against storms and winds. The heartwood is surrounded by sapwood, the younger, living layers that transport water and nutrients from the roots to the leaves. And on the very outside, just beneath the bark, is a thin layer called the cambium, where all new growth happens. Every year, the cambium creates a new ring of wood, which is why we can count the rings in a tree stump to tell its age. Each ring tells a story. A wide ring means a year of good rain and sunshine. A narrow ring speaks of drought or difficulty. The bark itself is the tree's skin, its protection against the world. Some trees have smooth bark, some have bark that peels away in papery layers, and others develop thick, deeply furrowed bark as they age. The giant sequoias of California have bark that can be up to 3 feet thick, protecting them from fire and insects. This thick bark is spongy and fibrous, filled with air pockets, which insulates the living tissue inside from the intense heat of forest fires that sweep through their groves every few decades. Let the image of that ancient sequoia settle into your mind as you rest. A tree so vast and so old that it has survived fire after fire, storm after storm, standing peaceful and unshaken. Trees teach us patience. They teach us endurance. They show us that growth happens slowly, steadily, one ring at a time, and that the most magnificent things in this world are often the result of centuries of quiet, persistent being. Rest now, knowing that somewhere in the world, trees are growing in the darkness, their roots drinking deep from the earth, their branches reaching toward tomorrow's sun. As we move deeper into the forest of knowledge, let's explore how trees sense and respond to the world around them. Trees may not have eyes or ears as we do, but they are far from unaware. They perceive their environment in ways that are both subtle and profound. Trees can sense the changing of seasons through a delicate awareness of daylight. As autumn approaches and the days grow shorter, deciduous trees detect the decreasing hours of sunlight. This triggers a remarkable transformation. The tree begins to break down the chlorophyll in its leaves, that green pigment that has been working all summer to capture sunlight. As the green fades, other pigments that were always present in the leaf, hidden beneath the chlorophyll, are finally revealed. The yellows of xanthophyll, the oranges of carotene, the reds and purples of anthocyanins. These colors were there all along, waiting patiently for their moment to shine. So when you see the brilliant autumn colors painting the hillsides, you're witnessing not a dying, but an unveiling. Before those leaves fall, the tree carefully withdraws valuable nutrients from them, pulling nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential elements back into its branches and trunk to be stored for the winter and reused in spring. This is why fallen leaves are paler versions of their autumn glory. The tree wastes nothing. At the base of each leaf stem, the tree forms a special layer of cells called the abscission layer, which gradually seals off the connection between leaf and branch. When the time is right, perhaps triggered by a frost or a strong wind, the leaf simply lets go, drifting down a carpet the forest floor. Now, imagine a tree on a hillside, growing not straight up, but at an angle, perhaps because it's sprouted on a slope or because it's reaching toward a gap in the canopy where sunlight streams through. Trees have a remarkable ability to sense gravity through specialized cells that contain tiny grains of starch. These grains settle to the bottom of the cells, much like sand settling in water, telling the tree which way is down. In response, the tree produces growth hormones that cause the lower side of a leaning trunk to grow more wood than the upper side, gradually pushing the tree back toward vertical. This is why you often see trees with curved trunks in the forest, each curve telling a story of the tree's long, patient effort to stand upright. Trees also sense and respond to touch. When wind constantly blows against a tree, bending and swaying its branches, the tree responds by growing shorter and stouter, developing a thicker trunk and denser wood. This phenomenon is called thigmomorphogenesis, and it ensures that trees growing in windy locations become strong enough to withstand those very winds. In calm forest interiors, protected by their neighbors, trees can afford to grow tall and slender, reaching for the light. But on an exposed mountaintop or coastal cliff, trees hunker down, their compact forms shaped by years of persistent wind. Let your breathing slow and deepen as we consider the lifespan of leaves. While we often think of leaves lasting for a single season, this varies remarkably among different trees. The needles of pine trees, for instance, typically live for 2 to 5 years before they're shed and replaced. Each needle is a marvel of efficiency, its thin shape reducing water loss while still capturing sunlight. Bristlecone pine needles can live for an astounding 30 to 45 years, among the longest-lived leaves in the plant kingdom. These ancient needles cling to branches in the harsh mountain environments where bristlecone pines grow, where every resource must be conserved and nothing is wasted. In tropical rainforests, where it's warm and wet year-round, many trees are evergreen, but they still shed and replace their leaves. They simply do it gradually, a few leaves at a time throughout the year, rather than all at once in autumn. This means that a rainforest tree is constantly renewing itself, always green, always photosynthesizing, taking advantage of the endless summer. Trees have their own sense of time, their own internal clocks. Many trees track not just the daily cycle of light and dark, but also the lunar cycle. Some species time their flowering to the phases of the moon, though scientists are still working to understand exactly why. Trees also count the cold days of winter through a process called vernalization. Many temperate trees require a certain number of days below a specific temperature before they'll break dormancy in spring. This prevents them from being fooled by a brief warm spell in January into leafing out too early, only to be killed by the next frost. The tree counts the cold, waiting patiently until it has accumulated enough winter, and only then does it allow itself to respond to the warmth of spring. Consider the height of trees, those towering giants that seem to touch the sky. The tallest tree in the world is a coast redwood named Hyperion, standing an astounding 380.3 feet tall. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty from base to torch. But trees can't grow infinitely tall. There's a physical limit to how high water can be pulled from the roots to the topmost leaves. As trees grow taller, it becomes increasingly difficult to move water upward against gravity through hundreds of feet of wood. Scientists believe the maximum theoretical height for a tree is somewhere around 400 to 425 feet, and Hyperion is already approaching that limit. The wood itself, that solid substance that makes up the trunk and branches, is mostly empty space. Wood is a matrix of cellulose fibers, creating countless tiny tubes and chambers. When a tree is alive, many of these spaces are filled with water, which is why fresh-cut wood is so heavy and why lumber must be dried before it can be used for building. But even in dried wood, as much as half the volume can be air pockets, trapped within the cellular structure. This is what makes wood both strong and light, capable of supporting the massive weight of a tree's canopy, while still being workable for human hands. Settle deeper into rest now, imagining yourself as a tree, your roots deep in the earth, your crown in the sky, feeling the slow passage of seasons, the patient accumulation of years, one ring at a time. Trees do not hurry. They simply grow, steady and sure, day after day, year after year, century after century. Let us wander now into the heart of an old-growth forest, where trees have stood undisturbed for centuries, where the air is hushed and cool, and where life exists in layers, from the forest floor to the canopy high above. In these ancient forests, the largest and oldest trees are called mother trees, and they play a crucial role in the life of the forest. Through that underground fungal network we spoke of earlier, a mother tree can be connected to hundreds of other trees, including her own offspring. Scientists have discovered that these mother trees recognize their own kin and actually send them more carbon and nutrients through the fungal network than they send strangers. A mother tree can nurture her young seedlings growing in her shadow, giving them the extra sugar and nutrients they need to survive in the dim light of the forest floor where photosynthesis is difficult. She can keep her children alive for years, even decades, until a gap opens in the canopy and they finally receive enough light to grow on their own. When a tree is injured or attacked by insects, it doesn't suffer in silence. Trees produce chemical compounds in response to damage, and these chemicals can travel through the air to warn neighboring trees of danger. When a willow tree is being eaten by caterpillars, it releases volatile organic compounds into the air. Nearby willows detect these airborne signals and respond by increasing the production of toxic or unpalatable chemicals in their own leaves, making themselves less appetizing to the approaching caterpillars before they even arrive. The trees are talking to each other in a language of chemistry, a conversation carried on the breeze. Trees also communicate through the fungal network below ground, sending electrical and chemical signals. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can send warning signals through the mycelium to its neighbors, and those neighbors will begin preparing their defenses. This underground network is so extensive that in some forests, nearly every tree is connected to every other tree through this web of fungal threads. The fungi receive sugars from the trees in exchange for helping them communicate and absorb water and nutrients from the soil. It's a partnership that has existed for over 400 million years, nearly as long as trees themselves have existed on land. As you breathe slowly and deeply, consider the water that moves through a tree. A large oak tree can draw up over 50 gallons of water from the soil every single day during the growing season. This water travels up through the sapwood in tiny tubes called xylem, moving from root to leaf. But here's the remarkable part. There's no pump, no heart pushing the water upward. Instead, water is pulled up by a combination of evaporation from the leaves and the cohesive properties of water molecules themselves. Water molecules stick to each other so strongly that they form continuous columns from root to leaf, and as water evaporates from the leaves, it pulls more water up from below, the way you might pull a chain up by lifting the top link. This process can raise water over 300 feet into the air in the tallest trees, defying gravity through nothing but the elegant physics of cohesion and evaporation. In the forest, different trees occupy different layers. The tallest trees form the emergent layer, their crowns rising above the main canopy, receiving the most sunlight but also bearing the brunt of wind and storms. Below them, the canopy layer forms a continuous roof of leaves, home to countless birds, insects, and other creatures. Most of the forest photosynthesis happens here, in this green ceiling. Beneath the canopy is the understory, where smaller trees and large shrubs grow in the filtered light. And finally, the forest floor, dim and cool, carpeted with ferns, mosses, wildflowers, and fallen leaves in various stages of decay. The fallen leaves and dead wood on the forest floor are not waste, but treasure. A single fallen log can take decades, or even centuries to fully decompose, and during that time it becomes a nurse log, a long mound of slowly rotting wood that provides the perfect soft, moist, nutrient-rich substrate for new seedlings to take root. In old-growth forests, you'll often see a row of young trees growing in a perfectly straight line, all of them sprouted from a nurse log that has long since crumbled away beneath them. The old tree, even in death, gives life to the next generation. Trees have different strategies for reproduction. Some trees produce vast quantities of small seeds. A single maple tree might produce thousands of winged seeds each year, those little helicopters that spin through the air and drift on the wind. Most will never germinate, and of those that do, most will not survive. But by producing so many, the tree ensures that at least a few will find favorable conditions and grow. Other trees, like oaks, produce fewer but larger seeds. Each acorn is packed with nutrients, giving the seedling a substantial food reserve to draw on during its first year of life. Squirrels and jays gather these acorns and bury them for winter food, but they never retrieve them all. The forgotten acorns sprout into oak seedlings, and in this way, the animals and trees help each other, the animals fed by the tree's bounty, the tree's seeds planted far and wide by the animal's hoarding instinct. Some trees are amazingly patient when it comes to reproduction. Bamboo, which is technically a grass but grows as tall as a tree, has one of the most unusual reproductive cycles in nature. Certain species of bamboo will grow for decades, even up to 120 years, without flowering. Then, all at once, every bamboo plant of that species across an entire region, sometimes across multiple countries, will flower simultaneously, produce seeds, and die. Scientists still don't fully understand how the bamboo plants coordinate this mass flowering across such vast distances, all blooming in the same year despite being separated by thousands of miles. Let your mind drift now through these quiet forests, where time moves slowly and every living thing is connected to every other living thing in ways both visible and invisible. The trees stand in community, supporting one another, feeding one another, warning one another of danger, their roots intertwined beneath the earth, their branches reaching toward the same sun. Rest in the knowledge that forests have their own wisdom, their own ways of being that are far older than human civilization. They teach us about cooperation, about patience, about the strength that comes from community. As you sink deeper into sleep, imagine yourself held by the forest, supported by roots deep in the earth, sheltered by branches overhead, part of something ancient and enduring. Let us travel now through the cycle of seasons, following a tree through the endless wheel of the year, watching as it adapts and changes, as it sleeps and awakens, as it endures and flourishes. Winter comes to the temperate forest, and the deciduous trees stand bare against the sky, their branches dark and seemingly lifeless. But appearances deceive. The tree is not dead, merely dormant, in a state of deep rest not unlike sleep. Inside those bare branches, the tree is already prepared for spring. If you were to carefully cut open a winter twig, you would find tiny, perfectly formed leaves and flowers, miniature and folded, waiting inside protective bud scales. The tree formed these buds the previous summer, and they've been waiting through autumn and winter for their moment to unfold. Everything is ready. The tree simply waits for the right signal to wake. To survive the winter cold, trees in temperate and northern climates must protect themselves from freezing. Water expands when it freezes, and if the water inside a tree cells were to freeze solid, it would burst the cell walls and kill the tree. So trees prepare for winter by moving water out of their cells and into the spaces between cells, where it can freeze without causing damage. The cells themselves become concentrated with sugars and other substances that lower the freezing point, acting like natural antifreeze. Some trees can survive temperatures well below 0 Fahrenheit. Their tissues supercooled but not frozen solid, waiting patiently for spring. As winter softens into spring, the tree must decide when to wake up. This decision is critical. Wake too early, and a late frost might kill all the tender new leaves. Wake too late, and the tree loses precious weeks of the growing season. Trees use a sophisticated calculation, tracking both the accumulation of cold days during winter and the accumulation of warm days in early spring. Only when both conditions are met, when the tree has counted enough cold and enough warmth, do the buds begin to swell and open. This is why spring doesn't arrive on the same calendar date each year in the same place. The trees are waiting for the right combination of signals from the environment, and some years winter lingers longer than others. When the buds do open, the transformation is remarkably rapid. Leaves that were tightly furled in the bud expand to their full size in just a few days, growing so quickly you can almost watch it happen. The tree is spending stored energy now, energy that it saved up during the previous growing season and stored in its roots and trunk over the winter. Spring is expensive for a tree, requiring tremendous resources to produce all those new leaves. But it's an investment that will pay off throughout the summer as those leaves capture sunlight and make food. Many trees flower in spring, some even before their leaves emerge. If you've ever seen a tree suddenly covered in blossoms while its branches are still bare, you're witnessing a clever strategy. By flowering before the leaves appear, the tree ensures that its flowers are fully visible to pollinators, and that pollen can travel easily on the wind without being blocked by leaves. Cherry trees, magnolias, and dogwoods all flower on bare branches, creating those spectacular early spring displays that seem almost miraculous after the gray of winter. The flowers of trees are astonishingly diverse. Some trees, like willows and oaks, are wind-pollinated and produce small, inconspicuous flowers that release clouds of pollen into the spring air. Others, like apple trees and cherry trees, are insect-pollinated and produce large, showy, fragrant flowers to attract bees and other pollinators. The flower is the tree's way of ensuring its genetic material travels to other trees, creating the diversity necessary for healthy forests. Each flower is a promise of fruit, of seeds, of future trees. Summer arrives, and the tree is in its full glory, its crown dense with leaves, photosynthesizing at maximum capacity. During these long, warm days, the tree is doing most of its yearly growth, adding new wood beneath the bark, expanding its roots, storing energy for the future. A tree doesn't grow evenly throughout the year. Most of its growth happens in spring and early summer. By mid to late summer, many trees have already slowed their growth, even though they're still lush and green. They're beginning to prepare for autumn, gradually shifting their resources from growth to storage. The amount of carbon that trees capture and store during the growing season is staggering. Forests worldwide absorb approximately 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere every year. That's about 1/3 of the carbon dioxide released by burning fossil fuels. Every tree is a carbon storage unit, taking carbon from the air and locking it away in wood, which is roughly 50% carbon by dry weight. An average tree can store about 1 ton of carbon dioxide over its lifetime. When you walk through a forest, you're walking through a vast, living library of stored carbon, pulled from the air and transformed into solid wood. Trees also cool the world in another way beyond storing carbon. Through transpiration, releasing water vapor from their leaves, trees cool the air around them. A single tree can have the cooling effect of 10 room-sized air conditioners running for 20 hours a day. Cities with abundant tree cover can be 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than cities with few trees. This is why a walk in the forest on a hot summer day feels so refreshing. The trees are creating their own climate, a cool, moist microclimate beneath their canopy. As summer fades and autumn approaches once more, the tree begins its preparation for winter. It stops growing. It withdraws nutrients from its leaves. It forms those abscission layers, ready to release the leaves when the time is right. The cycle continues, round and round, year after year, the tree marking time in rings of wood, in seasons of leaves, in the patient rhythm of growth and rest, warmth and cold, light and darkness. Let yourself drift with the seasons now, feeling the slow turn of the year, the endless cycle that continues whether we're aware of it or not. The trees know the seasons in their very fiber. They bend to the rhythm of the earth and sun and moon. And so can you, letting go of hurry, settling into the natural pace of things, breathing slowly, resting deeply. Let us journey now across the world, from the frozen north to the steaming tropics, discovering the remarkable diversity of trees that have adapted to every corner of our planet where life can exist. In the far north, where winter lasts for 8 months and summer is brief and cool, grow the coniferous forests, also called the taiga or boreal forest. These are the largest forests on Earth, stretching in an unbroken band across Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia, and Russia. The trees here, spruce and fir and pine, are perfectly adapted to the cold. Their needle-shaped leaves have a small surface area, which reduces water loss, and they're covered in a waxy coating that protects them from freezing winds. Because these needles can survive the winter, the trees don't have to grow a complete new set of leaves every spring like deciduous trees do. This is crucial in the short growing season of the north, where every warm day must be used for growth, not for producing leaves. The shape of these northern conifers is distinctive, a narrow cone with branches that slope downward. This shape serves a purpose. Heavy snow slides off the sloping branches rather than accumulating and breaking them. Walk through a boreal forest in winter, and you'll see these dark green triangles rising from the snow, patient and enduring, waiting for spring. Moving south into temperate regions, we find the deciduous forests, where trees shed their leaves each autumn. But not all deciduous trees are the same. Oak trees, for instance, produce hard, dense wood and can live for several hundred years. A single oak tree might support more forms of wildlife than any other tree species in temperate forests. In contrast, aspen trees have soft, light wood and rarely live beyond 100 years. But aspen have a different strategy for longevity. They reproduce through root sprouts, sending up new trunks from their spreading root system. What looks like a grove of separate aspen trees is often a single organism connected underground, and these clonal colonies can live for thousands of years. In Utah, there's an aspen grove called Pando that covers 106 acres and consists of over 40,000 individual trunks, all genetically identical, all part of one organism. Pando is estimated to be 80,000 years old, making it perhaps the oldest living thing on Earth. In warmer temperate and subtropical regions, we encounter the magnificent southern live oaks, draped with Spanish moss, their massive horizontal branches spreading wide. Unlike most oaks, live oaks are evergreen, keeping their leaves year-round. Some of these live oaks are over 500 years old, and their branches can spread so far that a single tree's canopy might cover more than 17,000 square feet. Beneath such a tree, you could park dozens of cars in the shade. As we travel into the tropics, the diversity of trees explodes into overwhelming abundance. A single hectare of tropical rainforest might contain over 300 different species of trees, more than exist in all of North America combined. These trees are in constant competition for light, racing upward, and many tropical trees grow remarkably fast. Some species can grow 6 feet or more in a single year. In the rainforest, there's no winter, no season of rest, so trees can grow continuously. Tropical trees have evolved extraordinary adaptations. Many have buttress roots, huge flanges of wood that spread out from the base of the trunk like the fins on a rocket. These buttresses provide stability in the shallow rainforest soil and help support the tremendous weight of the tree's crown. Some rainforest trees grow to over 200 feet tall, their crowns spreading in the emergent layer above the main canopy, where they receive full tropical sun. The strangler fig has perhaps the most dramatic life cycle of any tree. It begins as a seed deposited in the canopy of another tree, often by a bird. The seed germinates high above the ground, and the young fig sends roots downward, wrapping around the trunk of the host tree. These roots grow and thicken, eventually reaching the ground and taking root in the soil. The fig's roots continue to grow and fuse together, forming a lattice around the host tree. Meanwhile, the fig's crown grows upward into the canopy. Over decades, the fig roots completely encase the host tree, and eventually the host tree dies, leaving the fig standing alone as a hollow cylinder of roots that has become a tree in its own right. In the driest regions of the world, trees have adapted to conserve every drop of water. The baobab tree of Africa has a massive, swollen trunk that can store thousands of gallons of water, allowing it to survive through long droughts. The baobab's trunk can grow to over 30 feet in diameter, and these trees can live for over 2,000 years. During the wet season, the baobab stores water in its spongy trunk tissue. During the dry season, it can draw on these reserves, and it often sheds its leaves to reduce water loss, standing bare-branched against the African sky. The Joshua tree of the Mojave Desert is not technically a tree at all, but a giant yucca plant, yet it grows in a tree-like form, with a thick trunk and spreading branches. Joshua trees grow incredibly slowly, sometimes only half an inch per year, and they can live for several hundred years. They bloom with creamy white flowers, but only after a cold winter followed by adequate spring rain. Some Joshua trees go years without blooming, waiting patiently for the right conditions. Mangrove trees have adapted to perhaps the most challenging environment of all, the boundary between land and sea. Mangroves grow in coastal salt water, their roots submerged at high tide, exposed at low tide. They can filter out up to 90% of the salt from seawater, and what salt does enter the tree is stored in old leaves, which the tree then drops, carrying the salt away. Mangrove roots create vital habitat for fish, crabs, and countless other marine creatures, and mangrove forests protect coastlines from erosion and storm surges, their dense roots breaking the force of waves. Let your mind wander now through these many forests, from the frozen north to the steaming tropics, from desert to coast. Each tree perfectly suited to its place, each one a testament to the power of adaptation, to life's ability to find a way in even the most challenging environments. Trees have conquered nearly every habitat on Earth, and in doing so, they've created the green foundation upon which so much other life depends. Rest now in the diversity of the world, in the knowledge that life takes countless forms, each one beautiful, each one finding its own way to thrive. No tree lives in isolation. Each one exists within a web of relationships, partnerships, and dependencies that connect it to countless other living things. Let us explore these connections now, the hidden alliances that allow trees to thrive. We've spoken of the fungal network that connects trees underground, but the relationship between trees and fungi deserves deeper attention. This partnership is called a mycorrhizal association, and it's one of the most important relationships in nature. The fungi colonize the tree's roots, extending thread-like structures called hyphae out into the soil. These hyphae are far thinner than the tree's own root hairs, allowing them to penetrate tiny spaces in the soil and access water and nutrients the tree couldn't reach on its own. A single teaspoon of healthy forest oil can contain several miles of these fungal threads, creating an almost incomprehensibly dense network beneath your feet. In exchange for helping the tree gather nutrients, the fungi receive sugars from the tree, products of photosynthesis that the fungi cannot make themselves because they lack chlorophyll. It's a fair trade, beneficial to both partners. Scientists estimate that up to 90% of all land plants, including nearly all trees, form mycorrhizal relationships with fungi. Without these fungal partners, most forests as we know them simply couldn't exist. Trees also depend on animals for reproduction. Many trees produce fruits to entice animals to eat them and disperse their seeds far from the parent tree. The fruit is essentially a bribe, a sweet package of nutrients that the tree offers in exchange for seed dispersal. When a bird eats a berry, the seeds pass through its digestive system unharmed and are deposited far away, wrapped in a bit of fertilizer. Some seeds actually germinate better after passing through an animal's gut, the digestive acids scarifying the seed coat and making it easier for the embryo to break free. The relationship between trees and their pollinators can be astonishingly specific. Some species of fig trees are pollinated by only one species of tiny wasp, and that wasp species pollinates only that one species of figure. The female wasp enters the fig through a tiny opening, losing her wings in the process, and lays her eggs inside while simultaneously pollinating the flowers. She dies inside the fig, and her offspring develop, mate, and then the new generation of female wasps emerges, carrying pollen to another fig tree. Neither the tree nor the wasp can reproduce without the other. They are bound together by millions of years of coevolution. Many trees also form partnerships with ants. Some tropical trees have hollow thorns or hollow stems that provide perfect homes for ant colonies. The ants defend the tree fiercely, attacking any animal that tries to eat the leaves and even clearing away competing plants that grow too close. In return, the tree provides the ants with shelter and, sometimes with special food bodies, small nutritious structures that grow on the leaves specifically to feed the ants. The partnership is so intimate that some species of ants and trees cannot survive without each other. Lichens, those crusty or leafy growths you often see on tree bark, are themselves a partnership between a fungus and either an alga or a cyanobacterium. The fungus provides structure and protection, while the alga or cyanobacterium photosynthesizes, producing food for both partners. Lichens don't harm the tree. They simply use the bark as a surface to grow on. In fact, the presence of many lichens on a tree is often a sign of good air quality, as many lichen species are sensitive to pollution. Birds and trees have evolved together for millions of years. Trees provide birds with nesting sites, food in the form of seeds and insects, and protection for predators. In return, birds disperse seeds, control insect populations, and even help with pollination in some cases. Woodpeckers excavate holes in dead or dying wood to reach insects, and these holes later become nesting sites for other bird species that can't excavate their own. A single dead tree, or snag, can provide homes for dozens of bird families over the years. Trees even form relationships with the soil microbes beyond just fungi. Bacteria in the soil help decompose fallen leaves and dead roots, releasing nutrients that the tree can absorb. Some trees, particularly in the legume family, form special nodules on their roots that house nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These bacteria can take nitrogen from the air, which plants cannot use directly, and convert it into a form that the tree can absorb. In return, the tree provides the bacteria with sugars. Black locust trees, a type of legume, can actually improve the soil they grow in, adding nitrogen that benefits not just themselves but also neighboring plants. The relationship between trees and the atmosphere is perhaps the most fundamental of all. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, while we and most other animals do the opposite. This complementary exchange has shaped the Earth's atmosphere for hundreds of millions of years. Before trees and other photosynthetic organisms evolved, Earth's atmosphere contained very little oxygen. It was the steady work of plants, over countless millennia, that filled the air with the oxygen that now sustains animal life. Every breath you take is made possible by trees and their ancient ancestors. Consider also the relationship between trees and water. Trees don't just use water. They are part of the water cycle itself. They draw water from deep in the soil and release it into the atmosphere through transpiration. This water vapor rises, forms clouds, and eventually falls as rain, perhaps hundreds of miles away. The Amazon rainforest, for instance, generates much of its own rainfall through this process. The trees transpire so much water that it creates rain clouds, which then rain on the forest, allowing the trees to continue growing, which allows them to continue transpiring. The trees are literally creating the conditions they need to survive. If too many trees are cut down, the cycle breaks, and the region can become much drier. Let yourself relax into this interconnected web now, understanding that nothing exists alone, that everything is part of a greater whole. The trees stand connected to the soil beneath them, to the fungi threading through the earth, to the bacteria and the nodules on their roots, to the birds in their branches, to the insects on their leaves, to the animals that eat their fruits, to the air they breathe, to the water they transpire, to the sun that gives them energy. And we, too, are part of this web, breathing the oxygen trees provide, cooled by their shade, nourished by their fruits, sheltered by their wood. Everything is connected. Everything belongs. Rest in that belonging now, in the great community of life. Trees are survivors. They have endured ice ages and droughts, fires and floods, storms, and the changing climate. Let us explore now the remarkable ways in which trees adapt, recover, and persist through challenges that would destroy lesser organisms. Fire, which seems so destructive, is actually essential to many forest ecosystems. Some trees have evolved not just to survive fire, but to depend on it. The lodgepole pine produces two types of cones: regular cones that open normally to release seeds, and serotinous cones that remain tightly closed for years, sealed with resin. These serotinous cones will only open when exposed to the intense heat of a forest fire, which melts the resin and allows the cones to release their seeds. After a fire sweeps through a lodgepole pine forest, these heat-open cones rain down millions of seeds onto the newly cleared, nutrient-rich soil. Within a few years, a dense new forest of young pines covers the burned ground. The fire that seemed to destroy the forest was actually part of its renewal. Some trees have bark so thick it insulates them from fire's heat. The giant sequoia, which we mentioned earlier, has bark up to 3 feet thick that's spongy and filled with tannins that resist burning. During a fire, the outer bark may char, but the living tissue inside remains protected. In fact, sequoia seeds also need fire to germinate successfully. The heat opens their cones, and the cleared, ashen-rich soil provides ideal conditions for seedlings. These ancient giants have survived countless fires over their 1,000-year lifespans. When trees are damaged by storms, breaking branches, or even splitting trunks, they have remarkable abilities to heal and adapt. Trees can't move away from danger, so they've evolved to be incredibly resilient. When a branch breaks, the tree seals off the wound with a combination of physical barriers and chemical compounds. It creates a boundary between the damaged tissue and the healthy tissue, preventing rot and disease from spreading into the rest of the tree. Over time, new wood grows over the wound, gradually covering it. If you look carefully at older trees, you can often see the rounded scars where large branches once broke away, now healed over with smooth bark. Trees can even survive losing their entire crown in certain circumstances. Some species, particularly hardwoods like oak and maple, can sprout new growth from dormant buds on their trunk or from their root collar if the main trunk is cut or broken. This is called coppicing, and it's a survival strategy that allows the tree to regrow even after catastrophic damage. The root system remains alive underground, and it sends up new shoots that grow rapidly, nourished by those established roots. Coppice trees can live for centuries, repeatedly cut back and regrowing, their root systems growing older and larger, even as their above-ground trunks remain relatively young. In areas prone to flooding, some trees have adapted to survive with their roots underwater for extended periods. Bald cypress trees, which grow in southern swamps, develop special structures called knees, woody projections that grow upward from the roots and stick up above the waterline. Scientists believe these knees help the tree get oxygen to its submerged roots, allowing it to thrive in environments where most trees would drown. Bald cypresses can live for over 1,000 years in these swampy conditions, their bases swollen and buttressed, perfectly adapted to their watery home. Trees also show remarkable resilience to drought. During extended dry periods, trees can close their stomata to prevent water loss, essentially holding their breath to conserve moisture. They can also shed some of their leaves to reduce the total surface area, losing water to evaporation. Some desert trees, like the mesquite, have roots that extend down over 100 feet into the soil, reaching deep water sources far below the surface. These tap roots act like straws, drawing water from depths that other plants cannot reach, allowing the tree to remain green even when the surface soil is dust dry. Trees can survive extreme cold through a process called cold hardening. As autumn progresses and temperatures drop, trees gradually adjust their internal chemistry, producing more protective compounds and altering the structure of their cell membranes to remain flexible at low temperatures. A tree that has properly hardened in autumn can survive temperatures that would have killed it in summer. This is why unseasonable freezes in late spring or early autumn can be so damaging. The trees haven't had time to prepare their defenses. Some of the oldest trees on Earth have survived by growing in the harshest environments where competition is minimal. The bristlecone pines we mentioned earlier grow high in the mountains of California and Nevada, at elevations between 9,000 and 11,000 feet, where the growing season is short, water is scarce, and winds are fierce. These trees grow incredibly slowly, sometimes adding only 1/100th of an inch to their diameter in a year. But this slow growth creates extremely dense wood that is highly resistant to rot, insects, and disease. Parts of a bristlecone pine can die, while other parts remain alive, the tree carrying both living and dead wood in the same twisted trunk. Some bristlecone pines are more dead than alive, with just a narrow strip of living bark connecting the roots to a few small branches. Yet they persist, year after year, century after century. Trees can also adapt to changing conditions over generations through evolution. When environmental conditions change gradually, trees with genetic variations that help them cope with the new conditions are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing those helpful traits to their offspring. Over many generations, the entire population shifts to become better suited to the new environment. This is how trees have survived past climate changes and how they may adapt to future ones. Though the current rate of climate change is faster than many tree species can adapt to through natural selection alone. Let these stories of resilience comfort you now as you drift towards sleep. Trees endure. They bend but do not break. They heal from wounds. They adapt to challenges. They survive fire and flood, drought and freeze, wind and time itself. There is strength in flexibility, power in patience, and wisdom in endurance. Like the trees, you too can weather storms and heal from damage. Like the trees, you too can stand firm when you need to and bend when you must. Rest now in the knowledge that resilience is part of nature, woven into the very fabric of life. For as long as humans have existed, we have lived alongside trees. Our ancestors sheltered beneath their branches, gathered their fruits, used their wood for fire and tools. The relationship between humans and trees is ancient and profound, woven into the very story of our species. Some of the oldest human-planted trees still stand today, testament to the care our ancestors took in cultivating these living companions. The oldest known planted tree is a sacred fig tree in Sri Lanka called the Jaya Sri Mahabodhi, which was planted in 288 BCE from a cutting taken from the tree under which Buddha is said to have achieved enlightenment. This tree has been carefully tended for over 2,300 years, making it not just old, but also a living link to human history stretching back millennia. Trees have shaped human civilization in countless ways. The invention of paper, made from tree pulp, revolutionized the spread of knowledge and culture. Before paper, knowledge was recorded on stone, clay, or animal skins, materials that were heavy, expensive, and difficult to produce. Paper made books accessible, education possible for more people, and allowed ideas to travel across continents and down through time. The page you might read a story on, the book that sits on your bedside table, ultimately owes its existence to trees. Wood as a building material has sheltered humanity for thousands of years. Unlike stone or brick, wood is relatively light, easy to work with simple tools, and has excellent insulating properties. A wooden house stays warm in winter and cool in summer. Wood is also incredibly strong for its weight. The great wooden temples of Japan, some over 1,000 years old, stand as proof of wood's durability when properly maintained. These buildings have survived earthquakes that would have toppled stone structures, the wood's flexibility allowing it to sway and absorb the shock. Trees have also been essential to human nutrition. Fruit trees, apples, oranges, cherries, peaches, and countless others, provide food that is not just nutritious, but delicious. Humans have cultivated fruit trees for at least 4,000 years, carefully selecting and breeding varieties to enhance desirable traits. A modern apple, for instance, is the result of millennia of selection, bred to be larger, sweeter, and more reliable than its wild ancestors. Some heritage apple varieties have been maintained for centuries, each one preserved by careful grafting, the same genetic individual reproduced again and again across generations. Chocolate, coffee, and many spices all come from trees. The cacao tree produces the pods from which chocolate is made, each pod containing 20 to 50 beans surrounded by sweet pulp. Coffee grows on trees as cherries, with 2 beans inside each fruit. Cinnamon is the inner bark of a tropical tree, carefully harvested and dried. Nutmeg, cloves, and many other spices also come from trees. These trees, grown in tropical regions around the world, have shaped global trade, sparked exploration, and enriched cuisines across cultures. Trees also provide rubber, a material that has become essential to modern life. Natural rubber comes from the sap of the rubber tree, primarily grown in Southeast Asia. When the bark is carefully cut, the tree bleeds latex, a milky white fluid that is collected and processed into rubber. A single rubber tree can be tapped for 25 to 30 years, providing a sustainable source of this versatile material used in everything from tires to medical gloves. Cork, that material used to seal wine bottles and make bulletin boards, comes from the bark of the cork oak tree. What's remarkable is that harvesting cork doesn't harm the tree. The outer bark is carefully stripped away, and the tree simply grows a new layer of cork bark. The same tree can be harvested every 9 to 12 years for its entire life, which can span 200 years or more. This sustainable harvest supports both an industry and the preservation of cork oak forests, particularly in Portugal and Spain. Maple syrup, that sweet breakfast staple, is made from the sap of sugar maple trees. In late winter and early spring, when temperatures fluctuate above and below freezing, sap flows in maple trees as they prepare for the growing season. This sap can be collected by drilling a small hole in the trunk and inserting a tap. The sap is then boiled down. It takes about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. The tree is not harmed by this process. The small hole heals, and the tree continues to grow. Some maple trees are tapped year after year for decades. Trees have also provided medicine throughout human history. Aspirin, one of the most widely used medicines in the world, was originally derived from the bark of willow trees. Indigenous peoples around the world discovered that willow bark could relieve pain and reduce fever, and they used it for thousands of years before scientists isolated the active compound and created synthetic aspirin. Even today, many medicines come from trees. The bark of the Pacific yew tree yields a compound used in cancer treatment. Quinine, used to treat malaria, comes from the bark of the cinchona tree. Trees are living pharmacies, and scientists continue to study them in search of new medicines. As you settle deeper into rest, consider the countless ways trees have supported human life. They have given us shelter and warmth, food and medicine, tools and materials. They have been our companions through all of human history, standing beside us as we built civilizations, as we created art and music and literature, as we explored and learned and grew. We owe so much to trees. And yet, the relationship is not one-sided. Humans, too, can care for trees. We can plant them, tend them, protect them. We can ensure that forests remain for future generations, that these ancient partnerships continue. In caring for trees, we care for ourselves, for our children, for the web of life that sustains us all. Rest in gratitude now for the trees that have given so much, and in the quiet resolve to protect and cherish them. Let your breathing slow, your body relax, your mind drift peacefully, like leaves floating on a gentle stream. Let us turn our attention now to the intricate inner workings of trees, to the quiet miracles happening inside bark and wood, in leaves and roots, every moment of every day. Trees are constantly moving water, even though they have no pump, no heart. The system that accomplishes this feat is called the transpiration stream, and it operates on principles of physics rather than biology. As water evaporates from the tiny pores in leaves, it creates a negative pressure, a pulling force that extends all the way down the tree to the roots. Because water molecules stick tightly to each other through hydrogen bonds, they form an unbroken chain from leaf to root. When one molecule evaporates from a leaf, it pulls the next molecule up behind it, which pulls the next, and so on, creating a continuous column of rising water. This process can move water at speeds of up to 150 feet per hour in a tall tree, all without any energy expenditure by the tree itself. The vessels that carry this water are microscopic tubes in the sapwood called xylem. In hardwood trees, these vessels are made of individual cells stacked end to end, with the end walls dissolve away to create a continuous pipe. The walls of these cells are reinforced with lignin, a complex polymer that makes them rigid and prevents them from collapsing under the negative pressure created by transpiration. In conifers, the xylem is made of different structures called tracheids, which are smaller and less efficient, but also less prone to problems if air bubbles form in the water column. Those air bubbles, called embolisms, are actually one of the biggest challenges trees face. If an air bubble forms in a xylem vessel, it can break the water column and prevent water from flowing through that vessel. This can happen during freezing, during extreme drought, or when the tree is wounded. Trees have backup systems, though. Each tree contains thousands of xylem vessels, so if some become blocked, others can still transport water. And some trees can actually repair embolisms under certain conditions, dissolving the air bubbles back in a solution and restoring water flow. While water moves up through the xylem, sugars move down through a different system called the phloem. The phloem is a network of living cells that transports the products of photosynthesis from the leaves to the rest of the tree. Unlike xylem, which is dead tissue forming rigid pipes, phloem consists of living cells arranged end to end. These cells have pores in their end walls, creating tubes called sieve tubes. The sugars move through the phloem in a process called translocation, flowing from areas of high concentration, the leaves where sugars are made, to areas of low concentration, the roots, trunk, and growing tissues, where sugars are used or stored. The rate of sugar transport through phloem is remarkable. Sugars can move through the phloem at speeds of up to 3 feet per hour, which might not sound fast until you consider that this is happening in thousands of microscopic tubes simultaneously, moving enormous quantities of dissolved sugar throughout the tree. A large tree might transport several hundred pounds of sugar from its leaves to its roots and other tissues in a single day during the height of the growing season. Trees also have a kind of immune system, though it works very differently from ours. When a tree is wounded or infected, it cannot mobilize white blood cells to fight off invaders. Instead, trees practice what scientists call compartmentalization. When damage occurs, the tree walls off the affected area, creating chemical and physical barriers to prevent the spread of decay or disease. It produces antimicrobial compounds, plugs up its xylem vessels in the damaged area, and builds layers of new cells around the wound. The damaged tissue is isolated but not removed. It remains part of the tree, sealed away inside. The cambium layer, that thin ring of cells just beneath the bark, is where all growth in a tree's diameter occurs. The cambium is a layer of stem cells, constantly dividing to produce new cells. Cells produced on the inner side of the cambium become new xylem, adding to the wood. Cells produced on the outer side become new phloem and bark. This single layer of cells, often just one cell thick, is responsible for all the radial growth of the tree, all the thickening of trunk and branches, all the new rings it would added year after year. The actual photosynthesis happening in leaves is a process of extraordinary elegance. Inside each leaf cell are structures called chloroplasts, tiny green factories inherited from ancient bacteria that were absorbed by plant cells over 1 billion years ago. Inside each chloroplast are stacks of membrane-bound compartments called thylakoids, where the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis occur. When light strikes the chlorophyll molecules in the thylakoid membranes, it energizes electrons, starting a chain reaction that ultimately splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released into the air, our oxygen, and the hydrogen is used, along with carbon dioxide, to build sugar molecules. This is the foundation of nearly all life on Earth. The ability to capture light energy and convert it into chemical energy stored in the bonds of sugar molecules. Each leaf is covered with a waxy cuticle that prevents water loss, but this waxy layer also prevents gas exchange. This is where the stomata come in, those tiny pores we mentioned earlier. Each stoma is surrounded by two guard cells that can change shape, opening and closing the pore. When a plant needs to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, the guard cells swell with water and curve apart, opening the stoma. When the plant needs to conserve water, the guard cells lose water and press together, closing the stoma. Trees are constantly adjusting the opening of thousands or millions of stomata across all their leaves, balancing the need for carbon dioxide against the need to conserve water, responding to light, humidity, and internal water status. Let your mind rest now in appreciation of these elegant systems. These processes refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Trees are not simple. They are intricate, sophisticated organisms, every bit as complex as animals, but operating on entirely different principles. They have no brain, yet they respond to their environment. They have no muscles, yet they move water and nutrients throughout their bodies. They have no voice, yet they communicate. They are a different kind of intelligence, a different way of being alive. Breathe slowly, deeply, letting these thoughts drift through your mind like sunlight through leaves. Rest in the wonder of it all. As we continue our journey through the world of trees, let us consider their future and ours, and how they are intertwined. Trees face challenges in the modern world, but they also hold promise, hope, and solutions. Trees are among our most powerful allies in addressing climate change. Through photosynthesis, trees remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it as wood. Scientists estimate that the world's forests currently store about 861 billion tons of carbon. That's carbon that would otherwise be in the atmosphere, trapping heat and warming the planet. A single mature tree absorbs approximately 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. When you consider that there are roughly 3 trillion trees on Earth, the total amount of carbon being stored and removed from the air is staggering. Reforestation and afforestation, replanting forests and creating new forests, are among the most effective strategies we have for removing carbon from the atmosphere. One study suggested that restoring forests on available land worldwide could capture 205 billion tons of carbon. That's roughly 2/3 of all the carbon that humans have added to the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. Trees grow slowly, but they work steadily, day after day, year after year, pulling carbon from the sky and locking it away in wood. Urban trees provide benefits that go far beyond carbon storage. Cities with robust urban forests are healthier places to live. Trees reduce air pollution by filtering particulates and absorbing harmful gases like ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. A single tree can remove up to 60 pounds of air pollution from the atmosphere each year. In a city, this can make a measurable difference in air quality and human health. Studies have shown that hospital patients with views of trees from their windows recover faster and require less pain medication than patients without such views. Trees also manage stormwater in cities, reducing flooding and water pollution. When rain falls on pavement and buildings, it runs off immediately, often carrying pollutants into storm drains and waterways. But when rain falls on tree canopy and soil around trees, much of it is absorbed or slowed down. A mature tree can intercept over 1,000 gallons of rainwater in its crown during a single year, allowing it to evaporate back into the atmosphere or to slowly soak into the ground. This reduces the burden on storm sewer systems and helps recharge groundwater. The economic value of trees is substantial. A single large tree can increase property values by thousands of dollars. Trees provide shade that reduces cooling costs in summer. Homes shaded by trees can be 8 to 10 degrees cooler, reducing air conditioning costs by 25 to 40%. Trees also act as windbreaks in winter, reducing heating costs. When you factor in all the benefits, carbon storage, air pollution removal, stormwater management, energy savings, increased property values, and enhanced quality of life, the economic value of urban trees has been calculated at billions of dollars annually in cities worldwide. Scientists are also discovering new uses for trees and tree products that could help create a more sustainable future. What can be engineered into materials like cross-laminated timber, which is strong enough to build tall buildings, potentially replacing steel and concrete in construction. Unlike steel and concrete, which require enormous amounts of energy to produce and release carbon dioxide in their manufacture, wood is a renewable resource that stores carbon. Buildings made of engineered wood are essentially carbon storage warehouses, locking away carbon for decades or centuries. Trees may also play a role in producing sustainable fuels and materials. Researchers are working on ways to convert wood waste and fast-growing trees into biofuels that could replace fossil fuels. Other scientists are developing processes to turn wood pulp into fibers that could replace synthetic plastics. Trees, managed sustainably, could provide renewable resources for many of the materials and fuels we currently derive from petroleum. Some tree species are being studied for their ability to clean contaminated soil, a process called phytoremediation. Certain trees can absorb heavy metals or other pollutants from soil and either break them down or store them harmlessly in their tissues. Willow and poplar trees, for instance, have been planted in areas contaminated with industrial pollutants, and over time, they can significantly reduce the contamination, making the land safe again for other uses. There are also efforts underway to protect and preserve ancient trees and old-growth forests. These ecosystems, which have developed over centuries without major disturbance, are irreplaceable. They contain biodiversity found nowhere else, store vast amounts of carbon, and provide genetic reservoirs that may prove crucial as the climate changes. Organizations around the world are working to identify, protect, and restore old-growth forests, recognizing them as treasures that belong not just to one nation, but to all humanity, to all life on Earth. Perhaps most importantly, trees connect us to nature and to each other. In an increasingly urbanized world, trees provide vital green spaces where people can relax, play, and find peace. Studies have shown that spending time among trees reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, improves mood, and enhances mental health. Simply being near trees makes us feel better. They remind us that we are part of nature, not separate from it, and that our well-being is tied to the well-being of the living world around us. As you drift now toward sleep, carry with you this knowledge. Trees have been Earth's patient companions for 385 million years. They have survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and continental drift. They will continue adapting, persisting, growing. And we have the privilege and responsibility to be good companions to them in return, to plant trees, to protect forests, to pass on to future generations a world still graced by these magnificent beings. Rest now in the quiet presence of trees, in their ancient wisdom, in their generous gift of oxygen with every breath you take. Let your mind grow still, like a forest at dusk, peaceful and calm. Feel yourself held by the earth, sheltered by the sky, part of the great community of life that includes every tree, every leaf, every root reaching down into darkness, every branch reaching up toward light. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in the world, a seed is germinating, a sapling is reaching for the sun, an ancient tree is adding one more ring to its heartwood, counting one more year in its long, patient life. The trees continue their quiet work, as they have for millions of years, as they will for millions more. And now, let yourself rest. Let go of all thoughts. Breathe deeply. Before we part ways, let's spend a few more moments in contemplation of trees, exploring some final wonders that reveal just how extraordinary these silent companions truly are. Trees have memory, though not in the way we think of memory. When a tree experiences stress, drought, extreme cold, or insect attack, it can remember that stress and respond more quickly if it happens again. Scientists have discovered that trees produce stress hormones similar to those in animals, and these hormones can trigger changes in gene expression that persist for weeks, months, or even years. A tree that has survived one drought will close its stomata more quickly during the next drought, having learned from experience. This is a kind of wisdom encoded not in a brain, but in the very chemistry of the tree's cells. Some trees can live without soil, drawing all the nutrients and water they need from the air and rain. These trees, called epiphytes, grow on other trees but are not parasites. The staghorn fern and many orchids are examples, but there are also epiphytic trees. In tropical cloud forests, trees can grow on the branches of other trees, their roots never touching the ground, living their entire lives suspended in the canopy. These aerial trees collect water from frequent mists and rains, and gather nutrients from decomposing leaves and organic debris that accumulates in the crooks of branches. The largest living organism on Earth is not a whale or an elephant, but a tree, or rather, a colony of trees. In Utah's Fish Lake National Forest, there exists a grove of quaking aspen called pando, which we mentioned earlier. This single genetic individual covers 106 acres and weighs an estimated 6,600 tons, making it the heaviest known organism on Earth. All 47,000 trees in the grove are connected by a single root system, and they're all clones, genetically identical stems sprouting from those shared roots. When one trunk dies, another sprouts nearby. The organism as a whole may be 80,000 years old, having survived the end of the last ice age. Trees can count, or at least, they can track numbers in their own way. Many trees require a specific number of cold days before they'll break dormancy in spring, and somehow, they keep track of how many cold days have passed. Similarly, some trees track the hours of darkness each night, using this information to determine when autumn is approaching. The mechanism involves special proteins that accumulate during darkness and break down in light, creating a kind of molecular hourglass that tells the tree how long the nights have become. The tallest flowering plants on Earth are the mountain ash trees of Australia, which can reach heights of over 330 feet, nearly matching the coastal redwoods of California. But what's remarkable is how quickly they grow. These eucalyptus trees can grow over 6 feet in a single year when young, racing toward the canopy in the competitive rainforests where they grow. Despite their incredible height, they can live for 400 years or more, tall sentinels in the Australian landscape. Trees produce sounds, though most are too quiet or at frequencies we cannot hear without special equipment. When trees are water-stressed, tiny air bubbles form in the xylem, breaking the water columns, and these embolisms produce ultrasonic clicks as they occur. Scientists can now listen to trees with special microphones and detect these clicks, giving them a way to monitor drought stress in real time. In a sense, thirsty trees whisper their distress in ultrasound. Some trees also produce audible creaks and groans as their trunks expand and contract with temperature changes, a slow breathing sound if you're patient enough to listen. The wood of different tree species has distinct properties that make each one suited for specific purposes. Balsa wood, from a tropical tree, is among the lightest woods in the world, with a density less than that of cork. It's so light that balsa wood can float higher in water than nearly any other wood. Conversely, lignum vitae, a Caribbean tree, produces the densest wood in the world, so heavy that it sinks in water. Lignum vitae wood is also self-lubricating due to its natural oils and was historically used for ship propeller bearings and other applications requiring wood that could withstand friction without breaking down. Trees can alter soil chemistry to favor their own growth and discourage competitors. Black walnut trees, for example, produce a chemical called juglone that is toxic to many other plants. This chemical is released from the tree's roots, leaves, and nuts, creating a zone around the tree where few other plants can grow. This gives the walnut tree's own seedlings an advantage. They're immune to juglone and reduces competition for water and nutrients. It's chemical warfare, conducted slowly and silently in the soil. Finally, consider the phenomenon of massed years. Many tree species, particularly oaks, hickories, and beeches, don't produce the same amount of seeds every year. Instead, they have boom and bust cycles. For several years, they might produce relatively few seeds, And then suddenly, all the trees of that species in a region will produce an enormous crop of seeds in the same year. This is called a mast year. Scientists believe this strategy evolved to overwhelm seed-eating animals. In low production years, squirrels and other animals eat nearly all the seeds. But in a mast year, there are so many seeds that even the hungriest animals can't eat them all, ensuring that some seeds survive to germinate. What's remarkable is that trees across hundreds of square miles somehow synchronize their reproduction, all producing massive seed crops in the same year. How they coordinate across such distances remains one of the mysteries of tree biology. Let yourself sink deeper now into the mystery and wonder of it all. Trees are ancient, patient, wise in their own way. They remember, they communicate, they cooperate, they compete, they adapt, they endure. They are so much more than the simple, silent organisms they might appear to be at first glance. As you rest, imagine yourself as part of this great community of life. Imagine roots connecting you to others, to the earth, to the past, and the future. Imagine standing tall through storms, bending but not breaking. Imagine the patience to grow slowly, to add one ring at a time, to measure your life not in days but in decades, in centuries. Trees teach us that there are many ways to be alive, many kinds of intelligence, many forms of wisdom. They teach us patience. They teach us resilience. They teach us community. They teach us that sometimes the best thing to do is simply to stand still, to breathe, to reach toward the light, to let our roots go deep. And now, in these final moments, let all these thoughts drift away like autumn leaves on a gentle breeze. Let your mind grow as quiet as a forest in winter, as peaceful as a grove at twilight. Feel the earth beneath you, the air around you, the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, like sap rising in spring, like water flowing through xylem, like life itself, patient and persistent and calm. Rest now, sleep now, dream of trees, if you dream at all, and know that when you wake, the trees will still be there, growing quietly, breathing slowly, standing witness to the turning of a world.